All About Equity podcast Invisible Communities. Romani women speak of erasure, identity, and their fight for equity. This is a conversation based on personal experiences and opinions. It also touches on sensitive topics, including discrimination and persecution. Please take care while listening.
Welcome to today's podcast, which is GRT and equity. So the acronym GRT stands for Gypsy, Roma and Traveller Communities. It's often used in policy, advocacy and healthcare contexts to group together multiple communities with distinct identities. And I'd really like to welcome two incredible women from the Romanichal community, Charmaine and Alexus. Charmaine is the founder of Pride of Romany, a UK charity advocating on behalf of the Romanichal people in the UK. And Alexus is a representative of Pride of Romany across the pond in the US and also a well-known TikTok influencer under the name Romanichal Gal. So today we're going to talk about which communities come under the GRT banner and why, and the problems associated with the lack of differentiation between these distinct communities in wider society, and how this perpetuates inequity, and also what needs to be done to change this for a more equitable future. So I think we need to give our listeners a bit of a background, really. The acronym GRT covers multiple distinct ethnic groups. What do we mean when we say GRT? Who are we actually talking about? And Charmaine, do you want to start off with that?
Yes, so the word GRT is a government and policy maker acronym, and it is Gypsy, Roma and Traveller. We as Romanichal people, we completely accept the term Gypsy. It's part of our history and identity as English and American Romanichals, and in our countries and the origins of it within our history were not in a salacious or in a slow way, whereas our Eastern European Roma cousins and Sinti cousins do not like it because of the connotations of it that happened in the First and Second World War. So we fall under the G for Gypsy banner. So Romanichals, Welsh Calais and Scottish Romani people would fall under the G, and then the rest of Romani people across the globe are seen as Roma, so they are R for the Roma people, and then T is for travellers and ethnic travellers, so Scottish and Irish travellers have to share their identity with occupational travellers, so showmen and fairground people, circus performers, and then they also have to share the traveller terminology with New Age travellers that we would consider, which we all consider hippies, people that live on boats, people that live roadside that are not ethnically travellers. Quite confusing.
So really covers a wide range of communities. And you are both from the Romanichal community. Can you just both just tell us who are the Romanichal people? Tell us a bit about the history and culture and also your upbringing.
Charmaine, you can go first, because I think it would be a good segue to talk about how I kind of came from that group.
Yeah. So the Romanichal people came here into the United Kingdom in the 1400s. Our migration started over 1,000 years ago. So we started off in Rajasthan, and we are a South Asian people. We still carry those genetics with us today. And we travelled across continents and countries and landed in Scotland in the 1400s. And you can pick us up in historical documents as sand dancers, Egyptians, and then that later turned to gypsies. Our identity is a tribal identity. We live by strict moral cultural norms called Romani Pen that we don't speak and explain to people outside of our community. and our language is Rumnus. It's an ancient Sanskrit language. Our customs, our traditions, our identity are very proudly Romanichal. There's more than 45 Romani people, tribes of Romani people across the globe, and we are very proud of that identity. My upbringing was very proudly Romanichal. We didn't really mix outside of our community. So growing up, we went to school, but our social life was very much with our cousins, with our community, going to Romanichal churches, going away to fairs, pulling out with our cousins in the summer, and steeped in our culture and our history, our language, and we were always taught never ever to deny who we were, to be proud of being Romanichals. That's kind of not, I haven't lost it. I wouldn't say that I've lost that pride, but in having that pride, Sophie, what has happened now in modern day society is that it's almost frowned upon, that we have to shrink that identity. And I don't know when that happened. I even struggle myself to find out when that happened, that as British Romanichal people or British Romani people, why that identity is something now that we are almost punished for having. And that's
When
a
you
scary
mention,
thought.
yeah, so when you mention British Romanichal people, how many British Romanichal people are in the UK at the moment? Do you know?
I think there have been lots of intermarriages with Irish travelling people, but there is still a large amount of Romanichal people, of British Romanichal people that have married back in and married back in and married back in. My family is predominantly Romanichal, with just in recent years, so I'd say from the 90s onwards, kind of marrying out into Irish travellers, into Scottish travellers, into non-Romani people. To put statistics and say how many, because we don't identify and we don't tick forms and stuff, it would be a struggle. But I think back in the early 90s, when I looked at some stuff that came through of my late father's, I think it was probably around 500,000. But
Wow.
but we are, as Romani people, the biggest ethnic minority in Europe. That's
Wow.
all of the tribes.
And the Romanichal people are indigenous to Britain, and ethnically distinct from other
Yeah.
groups such as the Irish traveller community. Alexus, you are based in the US, so do you want to tell us a bit about your upbringing and what the Romanichal community is like over in the
Yeah.
US?
Yes. So the history that Charmaine described is exactly that. And then in about 1850 is when you start to see Romanichal come over to America in the Northeast, specifically, because there may be some accounts of earlier, but I'm pretty sure 1850 was the earliest I have documented of an ancestor coming to America. And we were always told growing up that we're Romanichal and our people came from England. And we're sort of like the English Romanichal, but we're American now, and we've been here since the 1850s. So it is pretty close knit here in the Northeast. And down south, there's families just like us that I've talked to out west. We grew up around our cousins, a lot of family functions. We are very close knit. We spend a lot of time with each other. Family is a big emphasis. And like Charmaine said, we'll even have like Romanichal organized churches. So we'll even have church to ourselves that's closed off to our community. I remember growing up in New Hampshire, my cousins, and they still do it today, rent a room in a hotel or a conference area. And that's where they're going to have church. And then cousins of the family will go there and we'll hold the church service ourselves. And cousins will play guitar and play gospel music themselves. Yeah.
So how many Romanichal people are there in the US? Do you know?
I saw a statistic online that said that there were about 100,000. I don't know like Charmaine said, I'm not sure how accurate that is, considering that things aren't documented very well, and I don't know if I've ever written down on a document that I was Romanichal, so how are they going to determine, you know? So I could see like groups in major city areas and major regions maybe adding up to a couple of thousand. Maybe it could come up to 10,000 if you include the New England and New York. Because I do know that when my great grandmother, Betsy Jane Stanley, died, my uncle Ace went around and tried to take like a toll of how many great grandkids and grandkids she had, and it was coming up to like 450. So
Wow, it's really interesting. You touched on something quite important there, which is about well, firstly, that the numbers, exact numbers are not known, and also that you don't always disclose your ethnicity on forms. And I think that they're two different really important things. The first thing is data collection, which I'd love to hear your opinion on. As far as I understand, at the moment, in the UK, our data collection does not differentiate between the different ethnic groups, and hence the GRT banner. And there are problems associated with that. And then, of course, there's mistrust, because of sort of historical reasons, mistrust about whether it's safe to disclose that identity. So, Charmaine, could you just talk a little bit about the wider consequences of lumping, having this GRT banner and lumping multiple ethnic groups all under the same GRT banner, the wider consequences in society, basically?
So medically, it's dangerous to place us alongside other ethnic minorities. It's certainly not about dividing, because as people, we're one human race. But it is very, very important medically for Romanichals to be seen as South Asian, and to be seen as Romanichals, because genetically we have disorders, genetic disorders, and things that happen to us, that things like thalassemia, Fanconi syndrome, lupus, sickle cell. Those are found in Black and minority people, and they're not found, or it's very rarely found in white people. And that happened to my sister. So my eldest sister, she had a condition called Fanconi syndrome that is more or less found only in Pakistani and Indian people. And it was a struggle to try and get a proper diagnosis for my sister. She later died of that illness. So for us, it's those things. Socially, having that identity and having a sense of who we are as people, visibility, having that visibility, that, you know, of being Romanichal people, that our children have something that they can identify with. And it's very important for our ancestors that history is told, because it's at risk of being lost or assimilated completely. But medically and morally, really, being seen as different ethnic people, because it has caused such mass confusion, Sophie, for the whole time that outsiders have inputted and had their say, rather than going and speaking to the people, rather than going and speaking to Romanichals, rather than going and speaking to Irish travelling people and asking them, what do you think about these terms? I think the term came about through trying to control people and push all of the people that they found difficult into one easy, manageable people. And what has happened is mass confusion, loss of identity, and cultural assimilation of those people. And for me, now's the time to speak about it and correct those wrongs, that have historically happened to both Romani gypsies and to Irish travellers. Let the people speak and let the people tell you who they are. The way that I like to put it is, it's like putting black with white.
Yeah.
And saying these are the same people. These are completely the same people. We can see that one set of people are black, the other set of people are white. Our histories, our traditions, our genetics, our DNA, our migration, our languages, they're all different. The one thing that, well, the two things that we have the same as Irish travellers are, one, a history of nomadism that can't be denied, and then the second is racism. Those are the two things that we have similar. But then if you push that out further, and what I try to explain to people is, so does that mean that we can identify with Native American people, to Aboriginal people, to Bedouin people? Because those people have been nomads, those people have struggled, those people have had racism thrown at them. It's almost kind of unpicking those things, Sophie, and making people understand that these things have been done to us. It's not about dividing us, but something has happened historically where now we have cultural loss of identity, loss of history, and a struggle for people to understand who they really are. And it rightly so, people can be angry when they're presented with what we're saying, because that's been done to them without consent, and it makes people hold a mirror up to themselves and go, oh my God, how did we allow this to happen? So you will have some kind of pushback from it, and there has been some pushback from it, but it's so important for our ancestors, for us, and for the next generation, that it's all of our responsibility to right those wrongs and to stand together and say, we don't want that anymore. We want to be seen as different communities. And people have the right to be seen as different communities.
It's almost like the BAME banner, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a shared experience in terms of prejudice, and you were talking about the shared experience of a nomadic lifestyle, but the difference is, in terms of cultural identity, in terms of education and policy and healthcare, that it's erasing cultures and communities by putting them together, and also means that there's consequences in terms of equity in society. And I think you've also touched on really another important point, is that when we make decisions in policy, we need to be engaging the communities that those policies influence, and that it needs to be widespread engagement as well. Like one person doesn't represent an entire community, and policy makers need to be listening to as many people as possible, really engaging them from start to finish. So I mean, Alexus, is this your experience as well in the US? That do you find that you're sort of lumped together with under this GRT ban in the same way?
No, because we're not having the nomadic problems that the UK is having, because America's so large. And growing up, I was in a trailer, but that was mostly what we do here. Is if young couples get together, they'll start out in a trailer and they'll travel for work, and they'll still travel for work later on in life. So, but we're not having that problem that they're having in England. And I feel like it's because England's so small, and we don't have. I've saw an Irish traveler once in my entire life, once when I was 21 years old. So we're not lumped together. We don't really grow up together. So when I was kind of doing my research, trying to be interested in what my English cousins were doing over in England, I would try to find like images of them. I would try to find any website that would represent them, and I couldn't. I would just find people like Irish travelers, or I would just find people that I wasn't sure was Romanichal. And usually, if a Romanichal sees another Romanichal, they can tell right off the bat. So I could see from over here that something was going on there. And then when I got on TikTok, it became much more apparent. People would try to have debates with me that Irish travelers and Romanichal are very similar and that there's really not any difference. But like Charmaine was saying earlier, we have Romney pen and there's things that we just aren't allowed to share. So I can't blatantly always explain it to them, but I did use the what Charmaine said. That's like comparing us to any nomadic people on the planet. Just because we travel and we have this nomadic history doesn't make us the same. We have a different language, we look different, we speak different. And of course, there are people that are mixed, but there's also people that have never have seen an Irish traveler once in their life. And so who's going to represent us? Where is there a safe space for us to speak? And that's why I was so excited to find Pride of the Romany and learn through Charmaine like what exactly they do, because there's a place where I can go and I can talk about my Romney pen. There's a place where I can go where I can give my history and be like, hey, where does this fit in like your database? So we don't really have that banner here.
Sorry, Alexus, could you just explain what's Romney pen?
It's sort of like the traditions and just the ways we were taught that we're not allowed to talk about really online. So it's, or share with other people. So sometimes on TikTok, it's like walking like eggshells because I need to make sure I never really disclose too much information, but also show enough where I can say we're our own Romani tribe, first of all, and number two, we're not Irish travelers. Yeah.
I think what I can share about Romney pen is that it is cultural norms that are in birth, death, marriage, those kind of norms, the way we interact with each other socially. So specific gender rules for men and women, how men and women interact socially together and don't interact socially together, cleanliness rules, very, very much like the Hasidic Jewish community. I think Romanichals are in that sense, about that sense of this bows for that, this bows for that. You don't do this, you don't do that. But it's such a deep, almost spiritual thing, Romney pen is, and to try and explain it to anybody who isn't a Romani, they'd be like, what is that? But if you ask an Irish travelling person what is Mockady, what is Romney pen, what are the Mockady rules, what are Romney pen rules, they wouldn't understand, because it isn't part of their culture, but it is completely part of our culture. It is very normal to us. And like Alexus, I didn't grow up around anyone that wasn't a Romani. So socially, we didn't interact with Irish travelling peoples because I wasn't brought up around Irish travelling people until later on in life. Then I started developing, and especially online, developing friendships with some Irish travelling women and men. But culturally, I find their culture very different in some ways, but also similar in some ways, especially around the rules around women, that some of them aren't allowed to do certain things the way that our women aren't allowed to do certain things. But that can be said for anybody from an ethnic minority. You have those similarities with any ethnic minority.
Yeah, exactly. We will find similarities with lots of different cultures, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be, categorized with them in healthcare, in education, and in the national census, and especially if our needs are very, very different. So I guess it kind of poses the question is what changes need to happen for a more equitable future?
Do you want to go first, Lexi?
Sure. So, I mean, coming from an American perspective and the stuff that's been happening to me online with the debates, it's kind of like things are being erased. When I try to find a nice picture to post, maybe not my family or of a Romanichal family, I'm actually not sure what I'm looking at. So it's kind of like, where's our history going? Is it being documented correctly? Am I looking at something that's Irish traveler or Romanichal because it's labeled as gypsy traveler? So I'm not sure if it's people that are half and half. I'm not sure if it's one that's just Irish traveler, and because people aren't educated enough, they put gypsy on there too. So definitely for like the history and for understanding like tribes outside of ours to understand us better, because there are some people from different tribes that will think that we're gone, that Romanichal don't really exist anymore because they mix so much with travelers, so they've lost their Romani pen, they've lost their language. But by, you know, making sure we are giving proper definitions of who we are and what history we're looking at, it's going to help give other people a definition of what we are, which is really important to us.
Charmaine, do you have anything to add to that in terms of, you know, how things are in the UK with our systems, or, you know, healthcare systems and data collection, or even just about sort of social awareness in society of the Romanichal people, and having an identity that's recognized?
I think moving away from acronyms and putting labels on ethnic minority people, I don't think that we as Romanichal deserve it, and I also don't think that Irish travelling people deserve it. To have labels stuck on us, and that will do for all of you people. It'll be one size fits all, and you're all going to have that kind of standard but substandard care, and we're going to say that you're all the same people, and that's it. That's all you're going to get. So see us as those diverse, different minorities. Yes, of course, stand shoulder to shoulder against racism, but also stand shoulder to shoulder against being assimilated. I think it's a very powerful message that both Romanichals and Irish travelling people now are starting to stand up. And we've seen that, Lexi, over the last couple of weeks, haven't we? That there are Irish travelling people that are saying, actually, no, what these Romanichal women are saying is factually correct. We aren't the same people, and we stand with them, that our histories have been diluted and misrepresented. I think separate ethnic tick boxes, that we don't have to share an ethnic tick box, because how can you collate data properly to give the best standard of care to both Romanichals or to Irish travelling people? The funding doesn't go where it needs to go, because, you know, we have funders over here that are giving money to help people that are living roadside. Predominantly, we're no longer nomadic. We're only nomadic in the summer, and we move around in the summer, sometimes for work, sometimes to go to fairs and to conventions and missions, and we pull out in the summer, but we are no longer nomadic. That is Irish travelling people, and that's being made increasingly difficult. But the funding that is for nomadic people should be going to Irish travellers. It shouldn't be going to us, because we haven't been really nomadic since the 1960s. That's evidenced. And to create spaces where people don't feel that they have to shrink their identity and have to apologise for having that pride in their own identity. Because, again, speaking over the last couple of weeks, the amount of harassment online about being proudly Romanichal and sharing our history, our language, our customs online, and celebrating that is almost like punished, Sophie. How dare you? How dare you have this identity? You're shoving it down people's throats, where I think it needs shoving down people's throats a little bit, because we have lost it. And it's been almost hidden. Our identity, our history, who we are as people has been hidden. And the amount of messages that I've had just over the last couple of weeks, Charmaine, please keep on doing what you're doing. It's actually giving our people a voice. We want to see our history. We want to see our identity. That's really empowering, because it can be a real struggle, Sophie. I know that me and you, Lexi, have had conversations where it's very draining, Sophie, because the amount of pushback. But you can't blame those people. So what's happened over the last, I'm going to say 60 years, is that people in power and people that are seen as community spokespeople, and people who have worked with central government and have supposed to have done stuff for our communities, have reduced us to an acronym of GRT. lumping all of those histories together, where it's just one massive confusing ball of confusion for everybody, and it's that will do for all of you people. It just won't do. It just won't do. And I think that time needs to, I think you've heard that saying, it's time to tap out. It's kind of like pass the baton over to the communities, pass those batons over to Romanichals, to the English Romani people, to the American Romani people, pass those batons over to the Irish travelling people, and let the communities speak, because instead of just one or two voices speaking to people in power, let the community speak. Go onto sites, go roadside, go to the fairs, go and speak to people, create events where the people can speak, and they will tell you, we're tired. We don't want this anymore.
You mentioned something, thank you for that, by the way. That's yeah, touched on so many really important points. You mentioned something about I think it was you, Alexus, where you're talking about the not disclosing that you're Romanichal in data collection. If policy were to change where you had those individual tick boxes for different ethnicities, how do we build trust with communities so that they feel safe to be able to disclose their ethnicity?
I would say education, because here in America, and I know it can be the same all over the world, but really here in America, you don't know what their reaction is going to be when you tell them.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to say, what is that? And then you kind of explain it to them. They're like, oh, okay. Are they going to be like, oh, a gypsy? And then kind of be like, put you on the radar for if anything wrong happens at work, or if anything missing happens, if anything missing, they're going to think it's you. You don't know if they just dismiss it altogether and say that's fake. So when I went to college, I didn't tell anybody I was Romanichal, and I'm trying to be more open about it. Like the job I have now, I've never told them, and I've been there for almost 3 years now. I think if I move on, maybe I'll start telling them. It's hard because you don't know what they know. You don't know what, stereotypes they've been exposed to, or if they're just going to completely dismiss you and think that you just want attention.
So when you say you haven't mentioned it at work, you're a TikTok influencer.
Yeah.
So what we would assume as somebody being, proud and vocal and confident, you still have reservations about sharing your ethnicity.
Yes. So I thought about it because a local did come up to me and say, oh, I see you on TikTok, and my heart sunk. I was like, oh boy, here it comes. It's gonna be like local news now. And so I've kind of mentally prepared myself for that. And then I talked about it to a Sinti Roma person in Germany, or from Germany, and he said to me, you don't owe anyone an explanation.
Yeah.
So if you really feel uncomfortable, you don't owe them an explanation. It's your life, it's your identity. You can say what you want about it, disclose what you want about it. And that made me feel better, because I was starting to get a little, overwhelmed and nervous with these conflicting, almost like feelings about it. Online, I'm very open about it. And then when I'm at work, I will tell people I'm Greek or Italian to avoid talking about it.
Gosh, thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's really difficult, isn't it? We want to sort of advocate for our communities and our identities, and we want to overcome stereotypes and prejudice. But also, we have to be honest that the burden of overcoming those things often rests with the communities themselves. And there is a level of exhaustion at having to advocate for yourself. So yeah, I think that really needs to be recognised. So can you just tell me a little bit about your work? If we start with Charmaine, how do you hope that your work will create awareness and create change? What are the things you try and do in your advocacy work?
Identity, really. To give our people identity, a pride in their identity, to preserve a history that is so worth preserving. that our ancestors deserve to have that history, because those people walked through fire, literally walked through fire for us to be here today. And just visibility, to give our people visibility, because we're not just the only Romani organisation in the UK, we're the only Romanichal organisation in the globe. There isn't one solely for British and American Romanichals. This is the first of its kind. And of course, advocacy. We would help anyone. If anyone came to us today and said, can you help us with, you know, people are being prejudiced against us, of course we'd help them. But our organisation is built by our people, for our people. And I am unapologetic in that. It's for our ancestors, it's for us, and it's for the next generation. Because one of the last things that my dad said to me, because he was in and out in the last days before he died, and he kept on saying, make sure the children remember, make sure the children know about Romney Pen. And we were just trying to pacify him, and we were like, he's in and out, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And he grabbed hold of me and he said, make sure our people survive, don't let it die. And that was probably about 2 days before he passed away. And then when you sit in your grief, and I sat in my grief for such a long time and just thought about it. And I kept on thinking, I don't want to let him down. It's one of the last promises I made to him. I didn't want to let him down. We must do it, because it doesn't just I don't want it to die with those last people that are the last of the wagon and tent dwellers. When that generation has gone, it's gone completely. So it has to be preserved. Our cousins that went over the Atlantic Ocean and made a new life in America, they need to know about the heritage this side of the pond and how our roots grew across oceans and where our people are now. And then when you look back on people, I've got a video on our TikTok of he died last year, Peter Ingram. He was another incredible person that was so proud of the identity of Romanichal people. And someone was asking him to sing a song in Rumnus. And then at the end of it, he says, it's all gone. It's all going. And it's so sad that our elders of our community truly believe that once they've gone, it's gone. So for us, that weight is for us to take from them. And it's almost like that promise of it won't be forgotten. And I won't apologize for that, Sophie. I won't, because our people need to survive. We've survived so much in this country. The history of persecution, the hangings, the slavery, the Egyptians Act, all of those things happened to our people. And we have to apologise for having our identity.
Can you just briefly explain what the Egyptians Act is, just for anybody who's listening doesn't know what that is?
So the Egyptian Act was put in by royal decree, and it started off with, if Romanichal people didn't abandon their identity as Romanichals and become less savage and assimilate into wider British society of those times, then they were all mass deported. It then went further, where they were branded, that if you were found in the company of a Romney person, then you would face being unalived, to hangings, to lynchings, to Romanichal people being nailed to trees. And then it went further to segregated schools. So the people that did the Native American schools, they came here and they tried to do that to, well, they did do that to Romanichal children. And that persistent narrative of the underachievement of Romanichal children, and then further to Irish travelling children, still continues today. But because we don't tick a tick box and say that we're Romani gypsies or Irish travellers, then they will say, oh, these children, they don't put their children into school when we're there, but they're hidden. Our children are hidden. So, and our children go into cultural denial in school to survive it. I've got cousins that they look, you can see in their appearance that they're Romanichal children. And I said, well, why don't you tell them? And she said, because I don't want to put a target on the children's backs. In today's society, people are still saying that. And then further along, we were shipped on slave ships and sent off to the Americas with the African slaves. And then when the end of chattel slavery for the African Americans happened, they were then allowed to keep Romanichal slaves. And there's documentation that that happened up until the World Romani Congress, where we lost our identity on a vote of 25 people. And things have just been done at our communities since we came here. So for us, it's always been about shrinking who we are, hiding who we are to make us more palatable for people. We're not doing that anymore. We're just not doing that anymore, Sophie. We're not doing that anymore. And what is really, it's empowered me over the last couple of weeks, that our men are not usually very vocal. They'll never step in until they need to step in. And over the last couple of weeks, to see our men step up on social media, which is so, it's just not what they do. And they've stepped up and they're like, you know what? We are Romanichal people and we are here and we're very proud of who we are, and we can't speak on other people, and it's not our place to speak on other people, and it's only right that we have representatives from our community. And those messages from the men in our community and some of the women saying, Charmaine, please just keep on going and keep pushing forward, and we really appreciate you. And then there was one message that came through and they were like, my mum and dad watch your videos. They can't read and write, so they're illiterate. They can't read and write. But we go into the trailer and we put the Pride of Romany TikToks on and they just sit and watch all of your videos. And I was like, oh my God, that is just like, that for me is why our organisation exists. So our people can see who they are. And when we were in our infancy and putting everything together, all you saw was, with the word Romanichal attached to it, was my big fat American gypsy wedding, where they used Romanichal in it. And then my big fat gypsy wedding, which was predominantly Irish travelling people, and it didn't really show a correct example of what their community was either. And I looked and I couldn't see anything that was representative of our people. So then we took to sharing my dad's legacy and all the archiving that he had done, from photographs to historical documents, everything. He'd evidenced it and preserved everything for us, almost like he knew that we needed it. And it's so strange because now, like when Lexi asked me for a document a couple of days ago, she said, I can't find it now online. Have you still got the original document? And I was like, yeah. And it's almost like he knew that we needed those things and he preserved it all ready for us to carry our history and our people forward.
Very well said.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that, Charmaine. That's amazing, and you describe some really positive shifts as well. Some really difficult history, but also you're saying, you know, that the men in your community are becoming more vocal as well. So yeah, that was really interesting to hear. Alexus, what do you hope to what change do you hope to create in your TikTok work and other work in the media?
Yeah, so I made an Instagram at first because I was doing my family history and really like digging really deep, trying to connect all like my aunts and uncles' stories together into one, and then trying to find the original documents coming from England and maybe even back further to the 17 and 1600s to England. And I used the ancestry.com to find the documents and stuff. And then I decided in my free time to also like look, I tried looking for Romanichal online. I couldn't find anything, but I saw these organizations on Instagram pop up for me. So I started digging into that and made a separate Instagram for it and started connecting with people. And a Roma from Turkey told me that I should make a TikTok. Make a TikTok, make a TikTok. And I'm like, I don't like TikTok. I've never used it before. And then I got on there and I also saw a misrepresentation. I didn't see Pride of the Romany pop up at first. And then I got on there and then I started connecting with Florian, who's also like an advocate and educator on TikTok for Romani altogether. And then he didn't ask me to do an interview with him. He said, I need a Romanichal to tell me how the big fat gypsy wedding was a huge hoax and that it was misrepresentative. And I'm like, we're dying for that because that TV show set us back. Like if we weren't already set back, we were set back even further from that TV show. So I did an interview with Florian, and then I just kept making videos on TikTok. And really, what was nice about TikTok is that it started to have me have like outreach to cousins I haven't really met before, like out west and down south. And I started to put together history videos because like Charmaine and her father believe like sometimes these new generations don't really know. And even like the older generations might have forgotten it, and it's just nice to go on there and just be like, don't forget your Romanichal. Don't forget about this history. Be prideful. Today you had to deny it, but now you're home watching TikTok and, remember that this is where you come from and that these were the old campsite names. So it's kind of like representation and giving people a little more pride in who they were and reminding them, and then also getting discussions going, which is, there's all that sad stuff where there's debates and people trying to put us down, but there's also really good discussions of cousins come forward and share images of their ancestors and share kind of like the traditions they still practice today with me, either in my direct messages or in my comments. And then I'll also connect with Roma and Sinti from all over. And then we'll compare our words, we'll compare our music, or stuff like that. And actually, Charmaine was talking about the Egyptians Act that threatened deportation, and there was deportation of Romanichal to Norway, Sweden, Finland, and you get the Romanichal and you get the Finnish Calais, and they're our cousins. And I recently reached out to a Finnish Calais, and we started talking about like some common words that we use, pretty similar to how we speak, sometimes even the same pronunciation. And then he shared music with me, and then we were comparing like the clothes and the way they do their hair. So it's been really cool to also connect with other tribes and groups.
Wow, yeah, that must be so interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thanks so much, Alexus and Charmaine, for like this incredible conversation about equity and recognition, the importance of differentiating between Gypsy, Roma, and traveller groups, not just for cultural identity, but for equity and policy, education, research, and healthcare. And to our listeners, you can make a difference by supporting charities like Pride of Romany and by following influencers like Alexus, who are providing a platform to speak about these really important issues.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to share your experiences in a safe and supportive space, either through a future podcast or our Romanichal focus group, we'd really welcome you. Please feel free to reach out to Sophie by email sophie-mira.roberts@alstrom.org.uk.